A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. We're going to be talking with John Crump from Ammoland here in just a moment. You know, remember when Joe Biden said, I've reached the limits of my executive authority? I realize that's kind of Bill Clinton. Anyway, he, Grandpa mumbles there that he had reached the limits of his executive authority. When it came to executive actions that he could take to, quote-unquote, stem gun violence. Well, did you believe him? Because you shouldn't have. As Crump is reporting, there is a new rule from the ATF that is in the works, expected to be introduced, at least unveiled, later this year with a public comment period to follow. This one dealing with private sales of firearms. We're going to get into the gory details here in just a moment. But before we do, you know, Biden's America is crushing us, and not just when it comes to our right to keep and bear arms. You've got companies laying off tens of thousands of workers, one after the other. Americans working two jobs just to get by. Inflation pushing hardworking families to the brink. Just look at the price of lunch meat next time you go to the grocery store. And the digital dollar could be coming down the pipeline to completely destroy our way of life. The truth is, you need a plan. You know it, and I know it. And that is why you should call Goldco, so you can diversify your savings and investments with gold and silver before things get worse. They're a six-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, with thousands of five-star reviews. And they've helped people like you and me place over $1 billion in gold and silver. They're offering up to $10,000 in free silver while supplies last. And if you call them today, qualified callers will get a free Ronald Reagan half-ounce silver coin. So don't wait. Call Goldco at 855-412-3806 today. That's 855-412-3806. All right, so let's get to our conversation with John Crump talking about this proposed rule that looks like it's coming down the pike from the ATF. This one, again, not dealing with frames or receivers, not trying to redefine what a firearm is, but instead trying to redefine who is predominantly engaged in the business of selling firearms in order to derive a profit, to predominantly earn a profit. Yeah. John, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. It's great talking to you again.
No problem. I always love coming on your show.
Well, and I don't love the information you always put out, but I love the fact that you're putting this information out there. There's not much to love about what looks to be coming down the road here from the Biden administration. And, you know, it was only a few months ago, Joe Biden said, I think I've reached the end of my executive authority. There's nothing more that I can do. We need Congress to act. And apparently that was yet another lie from Joe Biden, because it looks like there is another rule coming from the ATF.
Yeah, they're going to claim that Congress delegated the authority to them through the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, because in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, they changed the wording of what it is to be a gun seller. So now they're going to take that and run with it.
Yeah. And again, this change, as you write about it, Ammoland is now it takes someone from engaged in the business of selling guns with the principal objective of livelihood and profit to, as you say, the much more ambiguous statement of to predominantly earn a profit, right? And according to the BSCA, that means that the intent underlying the sale or disposition of firearms is predominantly one of obtaining pecuniary gain, as opposed to other intents such as improving or liquidating a personal firearms collection, provided that proof of profit shall not be required as to a person who engages in the regular and repetitive purchase and disposition of firearms for criminal purposes or terrorism. So what is this going to look like in practice? I mean, what are you hearing about this proposed rule from the ATF? How are they going to try to implement this new definition of who is predominantly trying to earn a profit by selling firearms?
Well, I want to start out by saying that everything that we have right now is in draft form. So everything is likely to change. So we don't have what the rule is going to look like when it hits the federal registry where people can comment on it. But right now, it looks like if you make a profit on selling a firearm, then they are going to consider you in the business of being a gun seller and require you to get a federal firearms license. Now, how are they going to enforce that? I'm not really sure. And at this point, I don't think they're really sure how they're going to enforce that or even know, because a lot of states, private sales are private. You don't have to go through an FFL or anything else like that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And then again, I mean, like as you say, trying to figure out, okay, well, who is in the who's predominantly earning a profit? How many guns are they selling? All of those seem to be pretty devilish details, but I guess from the perspective of the gun control groups and the Biden administration, it really doesn't matter. Those are devils that we will have to deal with, right? ATF might have to figure out how to enforce this law, but it's going to be gun owners who are trying to figure out how to stay in compliance with this law. And even if you live in a state that allows for private sales, theoretically, the ATF, that doesn't matter, right? If you are selling a firearm, and it could be as few as one firearm for a profit, they could say, well, you got to become an FFL.
That is correct. And that's the scary part. We don't have all the information yet because they don't have all the information. What I do see happening is that a bunch of anti-gun groups are going to start running social media campaigns and writing articles and everything else about the gun sale loophole or the private sales loophole, they call it, and the digital loophole, because they're going to go after places like Arms List as well and try to shut down those places.
Absolutely. I mean, you note that Arms List has been sued more than once. Those lawsuits have been unsuccessful, right? Basically, the judges have said Arms List is not an FFL. They are basically an online marketplace, and I think Section 230 applies to them, right? They're not responsible for the content of the postings that people are putting up. They're just sort of the message board itself. And we know the gun control groups hate that. It's also interesting, though, because the gun control groups have been on a tear the past couple of weeks, John. I'm sure you've noticed this, complaining that there are more FFLs in this country than Starbucks and McDonald's. And a lot of the FFLs that they're talking about are, again, not brick and mortar retailers, but they're people who have an FFL license for their own personal use, maybe, or maybe they're, doing something part time, whether it's, selling firearms or even just engaging in transfers. But the gun control groups hate the fact that there are so many FFLs out there. And if this rule change comes, they're either going to be a lot more FFLs, or maybe their intention is going to be cracking down on FFLs at the same time, requiring private sellers to become an FFL if they simply want to transfer a firearm and make even a couple of bucks profit.
Yeah, what I see happening is them trying to go after the tabletop FFLs in the future. Right now, there's like 16,596 brick and mortar stores at last count. I just did this research over the weekend. And there's 65,000 total FFLs, which says that most people are FFLs out of their home, tabletop FFLs.
Yeah. So do they want those around or not? Because it seems to me like so again, require people to become FFLs at the same time, cracking down on the number of FFLs. Where does that leave most gun owners?
That leaves most gun owners with less of a choice of how to get firearms. They know they can't ban firearms because every time they try to do that, they lose in the courts. So now they're trying to go after the actual transfer of firearms. It's something that I've seen them try to do in the past. It's just like with all the lawsuits against gun stores. Philadelphia is suing 3 gun stores and trying to claim that the PLCAA doesn't cover them because there was a straw purchase at a gun store, and since they had FFL or ATF training, they should have been able to spot that. So they're trying a lot of dirty tricks here to shut down the supply of firearms to the people, especially since the number of guns sold is way up over past times, since COVID at least.
Yeah, absolutely. 48 straight months of at least 1 million firearm transfers, according to the National Shooting Sports Foundation. I mean, that's pretty staggering. And again, the gun control movement is all about reducing the number of firearms, not to add in 1 million per month to the private collections of Americans. So you're right. We have seen this before. I mean, going back to the 90s, we've seen attempts to go after gun makers and gun stores. That won't change going forward. I'm curious, though, one of the other things we've seen about the BSCA in recent weeks is the fact that the Education Department is viewing another provision in that legislation as preventing funds going towards like archery in schools programs or hunter ed programs. And that's actually gotten some bipartisan opposition. Granted, the Democrats who are complaining about it are guys like, Joe Manchin and John Tester, who I think have their own political reasons for wanting to appear moderate on this issue. But I am hopeful, at least, that maybe with folks starting to take a look again at the language of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and maybe tweaking that language in order to, again, provide that funding going forward, maybe there's also an opportunity to go back and revisit this language and say, all right, we can already see what the ATF is going to try to do here in abusing this. So now let's go back and maybe go back to the old definition of who's engaged in the business of selling firearms to maybe thwart the ATF. Have you heard anything about plans to do something along those lines?
I heard some stuff in Congress about some Republicans that want to do that. But overall, I don't see a big push for that to happen. I hope it does, but I just don't see it happening right now. I don't think there's enough pushback. Maybe when it gets closer and the actual rule comes out or the proposed rule comes out, maybe then. But as of right now, I don't see it happening, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you're right. And it may be that, Congress is a reactive body for the most part. And so, you're reporting, I think it's probably the first time that a lot of Congress critters are even aware that this proposed rule is coming down the pike. Maybe when this rule actually does get officially proposed, that lights a fire under, Republicans' pants, and they do start moving forward on this. But also gun owners, we have an opportunity right now to speak up. And to let our representatives and senators know, hey, this is an issue that is concerning. It's on the horizon, and you need to get ahead of this. If we start making some noise, maybe that makes them perk up a little bit too.
Yeah, it definitely does. The New York Times reported on this, but their source was not as pro-gun as my source. I'm not going to say anything more than that. But so what they were trying to do is leak information that makes them look good.
Right.
Instead of the whole entire story. And what I'm trying to do is put out the whole entire story. I'm trying to be accurate. I am trying to put out good information that is accurate and complete. And I think we're going to see the other side try to put out partial information.
Oh, there we go. We got you back, John. Sorry, you hung up there for a second. But
sorry.
No, it's all good. Probably my end. I'm the one, I think, with the crummy internet connection living out in the middle of nowhere. But you're right that they will try to massage the narrative, and they'll try to use this, narrative. Oh my gosh, we've got just like, again, with the quote unquote gun show loophole, right? They claim that this is how criminals are acquiring firearms, and if we just shut this down, then problem solved. I mean, look, all you have to do is look at what's going on in California, right? Universal background checks, 10-day waiting periods. There are no private transfers of firearms. According to the FBI, California led the nation in the terms of active shooter incidents back in 2021, the last year for which we have any real valid data. And California's crime rate roughly that of Texas, right? So all of those gun control laws, criminals still getting a hold of firearms after closing the quote unquote gun show loophole and, going after quote unquote ghost guns and things of that nature. If you want to stop violent crime, you have to go after violent criminals. But if you want to stop legal gun ownership, you start doing stuff like this.
Yeah, we have seen prohibition on different things, alcohol, for example, and it never works. So I don't understand why they think prohibition on transferring firearms is going to work if it hasn't worked on anything. It hasn't worked with drugs. It hasn't worked on alcohol, and it's not going to work on firearms. I'm with you.
And can you imagine having to get like a liquor license before you get offered your neighbor a beer?
I
mean, right? I mean, like, well, we want to make sure that, we're stopping minors from drinking. We have over 100,000 alcohol involved deaths every year. So this is just a common sense, reasonable step to ensure that alcohol is not getting into the hands that it doesn't belong in. I don't think the American people would stand up for that or would take that line down. But again, we're going to have basically the equivalent of this. It sounds like coming from the ATF going forward. John, again, I really appreciate your reporting. Like I said, and like you said, this is in draft form, so we don't have a lot of the details yet. But I know that your source is going to continue talking to you. You've obviously got an open microphone anytime you want to come back and help spread the word here on Cam and Company. But in the meantime, if folks want to follow your reporting, what's the best way to do so?
Ammoland.com. That's where I do my writing at. I also have a YouTube channel, John Crump News, where I do on video stuff.
All right.
Those two places are the best.
No, John, listen, man, thanks again for everything you do. Thanks for joining me on the program today. And I look forward to having you back again very soon.
All right. Thank you, Cam.
I appreciate John joining us on the program. We obviously will be paying very close attention to anything coming out of the ATF related to this proposed rule, as well as continuing to follow what's going on with the ATF's frame and receiver rule, their pistol stabilizing brace rule, and their bump stock ban, all of which, by the way, still continuing on in the court. In fact, it'll be tomorrow when we expect to hear from the Supreme Court regarding the DOJ's request to keep the ATF's frame and receiver rule in place as opposed to the nationwide injunction that was filed by a U.S. district judge in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, a decision that the Fifth Circuit has largely, by the way, agreed with. All right, let's turn our attention now to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, as well as our recidivist report. We'll start there with a case out of Florida, where the man accused of shooting 2 Orlando police officers over the weekend had previous run-ins with law enforcement, according to local media. Quite the lengthy criminal history, apparently dating back to 2016 or so. Dayton Veal led police on an overnight pursuit over the weekend, critically injuring 2 officers in a shooting on Friday. He was caught in a hotel room, killed in a shootout with law enforcement. According to WESH in Orlando, Veal, again, had a criminal history dating back a number of years. Back in March of this year, Orlando police shared a tweet about how they had found the suspect in a case they've been trying to solve since December of 2022. They said that DeVille sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl. He was arrested on sexual battery and molestation charges. He posted bond, and then he was put on probation for this crime in April. Authorities say 2 months later, he violated the terms of his probation, cutting off his GPS monitor. Police weren't getting calls or answers from Veal's cell phone. They couldn't find him. A red Ford Fusion connected to a homicide in Miami was found on Friday. Veal was in that car Friday night. And again, that's when the gunshots were fired. The 2 officers were shot. Both officers expected to survive. But again, have to ask yourself the question, why did Dayton Veal, with so many criminal charges dating back to 2016, I believe, why on earth was he given such a lenient sentence and a plea deal when he's accused of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old girl? Probation, GPS monitoring, clearly didn't keep Mr. Veal there on the straight and narrow, given the circumstances of his death over the weekend. Now, today's armed citizen story from Maryland, where a 17-year-old in critical condition after apparently being a part of a carjacking that was stopped by a retired police officer. This is not the first time that we've heard a story like this, where individuals are able to track down their stolen car, go to find their stolen car only to be shot at by the occupants. In this case, it was in Glendale, Maryland. Detectives with the Prince George's County Police Department say the suspect, who is now in critical condition after being shot by that retired police officer, a 17-year-old from Mount Rainier, Maryland. According to WUSA, the teenager, armed with a handgun, led to the car sometime between Friday and Saturday evening. After the carjacking, a man identified as a retired police officer located the stolen car on Margarita Avenue in Prince George's County. He says the car had been stolen from a family member. Police say inside that stolen ride, there were 3 occupants, including the 17-year-old suspect, who got out of the vehicle during a confrontation between the man and the teenager, both of whom were armed. Police say the man shot the teenager. Man remained at the scene, provided aid to the teenager while the 2 other people inside the stolen car fled. The teen transported to an area hospital where he's recovering, facing multiple handgun charges, theft of vehicle charges. Right now, nobody else has been charged in connection with the case, including the retired law enforcement officer. Now, it does sound, based on initial reports, that this was a case of self-defense, but this is also Prince George's County, Maryland, one of the more anti-gun jurisdictions in the country. Certainly the state of Maryland is an anti-gun jurisdiction all on its own. So we will be keeping our eyes on this story, see if there's any more details that emerge. But right now, again, looks to be a case of self-defense. They're on the part of the retired police officer in Prince George's County, Maryland, one of the chosen few who are still able to carry, in most circumstances, in the state of Maryland, given all of the new gun-free zones that have been in place after the demise of their May-issue concealed carry laws. Finally today, our good deed of the day in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A gentleman who is homeless, who saved a woman in South Bend, Indiana, as well as her dog, from drowning in the St. Joseph River. The pair able to reunite just a couple of days ago. Jacob Schoenborn, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, is his name. Jacob has been in the South Bend, Indiana area for a few months. And really, again, in the right place at the right time. Just a few days ago, Patty Reisner, this was almost 2 months ago, back on June 16th. She was taking her dog for a walk. They walk along the St. Joseph's River. She said, I usually walk my dog in Howard Park. Had a plastic bag with my phone hanging on my arm. Dog's on the retractable leash. We get to the end of the race behind Oak Lawn, and the dog likes to put his paws in the river. So they walked down onto a boat ramp. But the ramp was a little slimy, had algae, had some goose droppings on it. She said her dog was starting to play, so she stepped forward to pick it up. She said it was nasty water. The ramp was slippery, and she lost her footing. She fell into the water. She's trying to keep herself and her dog out. She said that she was sure she would pull the current. Her dog went under the water. She was yelling for help, but she didn't see anybody. She said, I was sure they'd find me in a few weeks. I didn't have any ID on me, so they need to figure out who I was. I knew for sure I couldn't let go of the dog. And that is when her guardian angel stepped in. Jason Schoenborn came to her aid. First telling her, calm down. She said he took off his shoes and socks, sat down, scooted down the ramp, then extended his foot so she could grab onto it. And once she did, he was able to pull her up onto the ramp along with her dog. She said, he saved my life. He kept telling me he wasn't good in difficult situations. Clearly, he rose to the occasion. He said, my instinct to help clicked in. After he got her to safety, he pulled his one towel from his backpack, wrapped her up, and dried off the dog. Patty said my blue jeans and coat were sopping. It was like wearing a wet blanket. I was concerned about my wet phone, the keys in my bag, but Jacob said those are material things. Those can be replaced. So she actually left her dog in the care of Jacob and went to go get her car. She returned. She gave him some money. He said he didn't expect that, but he thanked her. She said she was sore for several days afterwards and said, I needed to recover, but once I felt better, I went down to look for him by the river again. Took a couple of trips to find him. She said, I told him that people needed to know what he did for me, that he was my guardian angel. I can tell that he's a good man. Only a good person would help me. So the pair reunited recently, and Jacob talked a little bit about how he got to South Bend, said that he was raised in Missouri and Oklahoma before moving to Indianapolis with his family. Says he knows he has depression, says he wants to get on the right track and get a job, but he isn't sure how. He has relatives in the area, but he hasn't had any contact with them. He said, my mother died 2 years ago, and she was my rock. In Indianapolis, he said he stayed with friends, stayed at a motel. Said I came to South Bend because I heard I could get help and there was a bed here. That lasted a week. I've been stranded for 4 months. Don't have any friends here. Now he's got one. And hopefully he's got more. Again, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. And I suspect that there are going to be some folks there in South Bend who will also be in the right place at the right time. Will be willing and able to lend a hand to Jacob Schoenborn. And hopefully get him on that right path. But again, Jacob, thank you for your very, very good deed. Now, that is all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always, and I'm looking forward to being back with you again tomorrow. Don't forget to check out BearingArms.com throughout the day for the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. We've got full house today. Tom Knighton, John Petrolito, Ranjit Singh, all contributing stories. Along with myself. So we got you covered on all the big news of the day. If you like what you see, I'd encourage you to become a VIP or VIP Gold member as well. Just go to BearingArms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code GUNRIGHTS, and you can get a significant savings on your VIP membership. As our way of saying thanks for showing your support for what we do, we're going to give you exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. News stories and analysis that matter, just like your support. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. As good as anybody can enjoy a Monday. We'll see you back here tomorrow for 2A Tuesday. Until then, be well. Be safe and be free.